After his rival went bankrupt, he worked as a male model in a bar. I threw the black card in his face and hooked his chin. Turn a piece of ice. 100,000. He meekly knelt in front of me and let me play with it. It wasn't until later that he made a comeback, and it was my family's turn to go bankrupt and go into debt. I was locked up in the villa by him. Merle Sassoon wrapped her tie around my wrist and chuckled. Eat a piece of ice. 100,000. Baby, how much do you want to borrow? I didn't expect Merle Sassoon to go bankrupt and become a male model in a bar. He was beaten by my illegitimate brother, and his nose and face were swollen. The once cold and noble prince didn't even dare to fight back. Even as I passed by, he quickly glanced at the handsome brother next to me. If he can do it, I can do it too. He grabbed my hand and reached into my abs hidden under my clothes, and a broken flush appeared at the end of his eyes. Try me. Me. He's seducing me. I believe he was really bankrupt. Otherwise, how could he be desperate to seek refuge in his sworn enemy? Shamefully, look at Merle Sassoon's pitiful appearance. I'm somehow a little perverted excited. I really want to make him cry. When I heard that I was going to take Merle Sassoon, my brother stopped me and refused to let her go. 3 years ago, as a scumbag, my brother bullied his classmates at school, and Merle Sassoon's 50-page report PPT with detailed evidence was sent to the school's top management. The prince of the Sassoon family made a move. Who would dare to protect him? Bart Stracheys spent half a year in the juvenile detention center, and when he came out, he completely hated Merle Sassoon. So now that Merle Sassoon is down, he certainly can't miss the opportunity to humiliate him. His grim gaze was fixed on Merle Sassoon behind me. Marcia Strachey, you think clearly about the consequences of offending me. I didn't say a word, moved my joints, beat him until I cried, and begged me to take someone away. But he was not honest. As soon as I got home, Bart Strachey called, uttered foul language, and told my dad to clean me up. I scoffed. Why? Your parents didn't take you to the hospital on the day of the rainstorm. Forget who is in charge of the company now. Marcia Strachey. You wait. Bart Strachey angrily dropped a harsh word and hung up. The sound of water in the bathroom just stopped. I looked up. Merle Sassoon wears a white shirt with 2 buttons unbuttoned at the top. Drops of water ran down his chin and into his strong pecs. Dadis, he just deliberately betrayed his hue to seduce me. I snorted. Get down on your knees, you. Merle Sassoon gritted her back molars. You're going to do this with that man. Why? Didn't you say anything you could do? I raised my chin as I slammed the door. I don't want you to leave now. Merle Sassoon was silent for a few seconds, and finally meekly knelt in front of me, but the clenched fists at his side betrayed his nervousness. I carelessly unbuttoned him one by one, his chest heaving under my hands. How much do you owe? 20 million. I raised my eyebrows and threw the black card that I had prepared long ago on his face, leaving a shallow red mark. Turn a piece of ice. 100,000. He looked at me for some reason. Hey. I turned on the ice maker while he was taking a shower. And now there are a bunch of square ice cubes in the ice bucket. I casually placed my hand on his bare chest, scratched over the bulge again. Merle Sassoon was shivering with ice, and her ears were crimson. I laughed and groaned. Don't hide. And I wanted to do that for a long time. When the ice comes into contact with the scorching heat, it doesn't take long for it to turn into wisps of water and burrow into the sexy mermaid line. He gasped under his breath. A wicked smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. Another piece was put in. I deliberately stepped on his lower abdomen, and the cold instantly jumped up from the soles of my feet, and the root gradually went downward, and then suddenly exerted force. Merle Sassoon let out a muffled grunt in her throat, and her eyes were misty. I pinched his ear. Isn't it cool? His eyelashes trembled. His face flushed, and he couldn't talk about his lips when he was pitiful to be bullied. I glanced contemptuously at my feet. Slap him in the face, Merle Sassoon. If it's not me today, someone else can be too. I humiliated him so much. I thought he was going to be angry. However, he was much cooler. No, he's M, but I'm not S. I lowered my eyes and pressed my fingers heavily on the corners of his lips. I want. Call the master. Merle Sassoon and I are bitter rivals. The two families are separated by 3 generations of grievances, and as soon as they meet, they can't wait to kill each other. Don't look at Merle Sassoon's appearance as a Kowloon flower. In fact, he is very good at fighting in private. When he was studying, he had to die in middle school, self-proclaimed school bully. How can I tolerate him overshadowing me? So I report him for fighting. I skipped class and he reported it. Anyway, it is impossible to let the other party have a few days of peace, targeting each other for more than a decade. When we grew up, our methods were even more unacceptable. He sent someone to secretly water our company's fortune tree in the middle of the night. I bribed his company security guard and made a hole in his money-swallowing ass. By the way, I ordered him a staff meal with a hot dog for a month. The secretary said that I killed not only my heart, but also my stomach. But even though I robbed me of a big project, Merle Sassoon was still calm and light, as if she didn't care. It's weird. If you really don't care, you won't use tricks to snatch people away the day before signing the contract. I also made a video call in the middle of the night to show off. Marcia Stracheys. I won again. Strangely, I wasn't angry at the time, because his mind was full of screens. Wet hair dripping and rolling into his slightly open neckline. The white shirt clings to the body, outlining the tight muscles. I was frightened by the terrible thoughts that suddenly flashed through my mind. I want to block and delete people in a big way. Later, the unstoppable Sassoon family went bankrupt. His dad packed his bags overnight and ran abroad, leaving the mess to Merle Sassoon. Creditors block his door every day. He disappeared for almost a month, and everyone said he should be floating on the high seas. So when I saw Merle Sassoon being bullied at the bar, the demons sent him home by sending him home. Her heart was beating fast under her palm, and the tips of Merle Sassoon's ears were red, like my devout believer, and she bowed her head and kissed the back of my hand, whispered 2 words, lustful and innocent. I'm a little emotional. Merle Sassoon is a professional counterpart in this business. I patted him on the face. It just so happens that I lack a canary to relieve boredom. 300,000 a month. His eyes lit up. I smiled and said, of course, I'll have to inspect the goods to see if you're worth it. And my fingers reached into his lips. I felt a brief dampness running through my fingertips. I was wrong. I stared distractedly at the flickering lamp above my head, clutching Merle Sassoon's hair feebly. No. Did he do it? Presumably to prove himself. Merle Sassoon forcefully inserted her 10 fingers between my fingers, her eyes under broken hair with an undeniable aggression. Marcia Stracheys. Leg elevated. Marcia Stracheys is so good. Marcia Stracheys. As long as I'm your little Finch. I slapped him angrily. I still want to. He chuckled and kissed my numb palm, and whispered in my ear, Master, please, me. I throw in the towel. He's more perverted than me. When I woke up, my whole body was sore, and I looked at the sleeping man beside me, with a blank expression. Raise your foot and kick it over. Bang. Merle Sassoon woke up with a confused expression. Marcia Stracheys. What's wrong? What's wrong? I gritted my teeth. Tell him to hurry up. Last night, he has to grind me. But will I speak out? If you say it, you will admit that I lost in disguise. A woman who is strong in her life will never admit defeat. I thought for a moment. I'm hungry. You go cook. After a night of absurdity, his voice was almost hoarse. Hearing this, Merle Sassoon looked guilty. I'm sorry, Marcia Stracheys. Blame me for making you too tired. Get out. Merle Sassoon's eyes swept over the scattered clothes, and a little shame appeared on her face. Marcia Stracheys, do you have any clothes? I rolled my eyes, playing so flowery. I started to pretend to be shy afterwards, but it seems that there are really no clothes. This apartment is where I stayed when I was resting, and only came over occasionally. He couldn't put on my clothes. But, I curled my lips suddenly. Yes. Merle Sassoon became nervous. How can you have men's clothes in your house, Marcia Stracheys? You promised me last night that as long as you do business, you must be honest in business. You can't regret it. Who is he? Is there me good looking? There is one. I understand you, he babbled. I put on my clothes, and threw the apron I had taken from the kitchen in his face. Before he could say the word tiger wolf, I folded my arms around my chest, and pressed the upturned corners of my mouth. That's all I wear. Merle Sassoon opened her mouth, flushing up the tips of her ears. He stammered, wear it, cook. I stilted my legs, and looked unscrupulously at Merle Sassoon, who was cooking in the kitchen in a vacuum apron. Oh, the pectoral muscles are so big. Alas, beauty misleads people. The last second, I was still messing around with Merle Sassoon in the kitchen. The next second, he turned off the gas, picked me up, and pressed me against the couch, biting my collarbone. Marcia Stracheys, Don't touch it. I raised an eyebrow. Just as I was about to say something, a hurried bell rang. Merle Sassoon half lifted her eyelids, and her tone was uncertain. Who called you so early? It's so rude. Unlike me, I'll just serve you well. I couldn't help but laugh and rolled over, and sat on his lap. My dad's old thing. Merle Sassoon lowered her eyes in embarrassment. My dad didn't like me, and if it weren't for Bard Stracheys can't support the company, I wouldn't be the president of the company. They don't usually call me unless Bard Stracheys sues him. Really? As soon as the phone was answered, my dad's angry voice came through the receiver. Are you Sassoon or Stracheys? Turning your elbow outward. You actually helped outsiders bully your brother. I nonchalantly messed around with Merle Sassoon's abs. No, I don't have a brother. My mother has been dead for 16 years, and if I really want a younger brother, that's also a ghost. Merle Sassoon bit her lip, suppressing a gasp that almost spilled out of her throat. Didn't I teach you? Merle Sassoon, hand him over to the creditors, and I'll see how the Sassoon family will turn over, I said lightly. He's pleasing me, and I smiled and leaned into Merle Sassoon's ear. How were you going to serve me just now? If you can't satisfy me, I'll give you over. Merle Sassoon's eyes darkened, and she grabbed my neck and pressed down. Marcia Stracheys. Our voices were soft. But the phone radio is good. My dad erupted in rage. It's not serious. Marcia Stracheys. No. Get the hell out of here. It's almost the moment the phone hangs up. Merle Sassoon kissed her fiercely. The kiss fell densely. As his hand reached into his clothes, I kicked him away again. He was suffocating. Marcia Stracheys. My secretary will bring clothes and medicine later. I looked ruthless and pressed the bruise at the corner of his lips. The most valuable thing for the prince now is this face. Heal the injury and then pamper you. Merle Sassoon's dark eyes were deep, and she clenched her fists in reluctance. I turned around, and the corners of my mouth almost flew into the air. Depend on. I'm so handsome. It turns out that being the owner of the money is so cool. As soon as I got home, I saw Bard Stracheys leaning on the spiral staircase, with a full head bag, and he didn't forget to provoke me. Marcia Stracheys. Dad is waiting for you, in the study. Didn't you use the company to press me? Dad said, Stracheys Group can only be mine. I looked him up and down disdainfully. It's like a year ago. I can't understand addition and subtraction in elementary school, and I lost 50 million in half a month. Forget about you and Henry snatching women, opening his head, and squatting in the bureau for 3 days. You, Bard Stracheys glared at me through gritted teeth. I scoffed and concluded, it's still a waste after a year. Bard Stracheys was speechless. As he passed by, he suddenly calmed down. So what? Stracheys' house is mine. Even if I want to defeat it, Dad won't say a word. It's you. Don't be like your slut mom, who ruined other people's families, and died early. In the last 3 words, he deliberately bit his voice. I stopped and looked at him, with a cold look in my eyes. He thought he had hit me in the sore spot, and proudly repeated it. I kicked him the knee and he fell to his knees in pain. You hit me again. I lowered my eyes, grabbed his hair, and slammed against the wall. His forehead instantly became red and swollen. The mouth can't speak, so I'll teach you. When the servant heard the commotion, he panicked forward to stop me, and was repelled by my eyes. I snorted, turned my head, and slapped him hard in the face. I've been a young master for a long time, and I forgot that your mother is a junior. Right. Bard Stracheys' facial features distorted in pain. I'm going to kill you. I just raised my hand to give him a symmetrical slap on the right side of his face. Bastard. My dad's face was gloomy. He's your brother, not an enemy. I glanced at the cowering servant hiding behind him. It was the letter she had reported. Slowly let go of his hand. What's the matter with calling me back? Bard Stracheys quickly got up, hugged my dad's thigh and howled wolf, and let him call the shots. My dad kicked him in hatred and said to me, follow me, and the study door was shut, blocking Bard Stracheys' vicious expression. My dad opened his mouth and asked me to hand over the position of president to Bard Stracheys. He said in a haughty tone, you owe it to your brother. I laughed. My mom died less than a month ago. He couldn't wait to bring home his illegitimate son, who was 2 years younger than me. His grandparents acquiesced in his genealogy. That's how I found out. Before he and my mother got married, they had their first love, but her grandmother disliked her bad background, and forced them to separate on my mother's wedding anniversary. His first love passed away due to childbirth. My dad thought it was all to blame on my mother, who didn't know about it. To marry him, he hated his mother for ruining his wonderful family, is clearly cowardly and hypocritical, and flaunts his affection. Also sang a pitiful drama of a hard-working Mandarin duck. Seeing that I didn't speak, my dad frowned. Don't worry about Stracheys' property. It's all going to be left to your brother in the future. You just remind him from time to time. Teach him well. Bard Strachey supports the Strachey family, and you will have the backing when you marry in the future, I said good-naturedly. Okay, then let Bard Strachey and Henry dock up on the project. Hearing this, my dad stopped me anxiously. Ahem. Let's wait until your work is done. Henry was the unlucky guy, who was beaten by Bard Strachey. Hundreds of millions of projects. Of course, he is not willing to destroy them in the hands of his baby son. I hummed disdainfully. My dad also knew how rubbish Bard Strachey really was. His eyes rolled and he made another calculation. You are also 26 years old this year, and my wife mentioned to me before that she likes you very much, and you will meet Vic in 2 days. Vic is notoriously romantic, and her lovers have changed one after another. I sneered, if you want to get married, you can go by yourself. I didn't hear that Vic doesn't like half-aged Shu Nan. Bastard. My dad shuddered, picked up his teacup and smashed it at my feet. Don't forget, your mother's ashes are with me. Men are so cheap. I don't like my mom. Also collected her ashes, and trumpeted that he was the man Ina Trolpo loved most during his lifetime. Finding that I was growing and uncontrollable, it became a means for him to manipulate me. 5 days later was my dad's birthday party. I used to do it, but this time it's all over to Bard Strachey. I just ended up idle. Pull Merle Sassoon on a home tour every day. Kitchen island, hallway, front of floor to ceiling windows, bathroom, unlocked some unashamed gameplay. In the middle of the night, I pressed his head to come over and kiss, and I was so sleepy that I yawned. Come back to the old house with me tomorrow, and dress better. He naturally took my fingertips in his mouth and grinded them gently. His voice slurred. Oh, in what capacity am I going? I lifted my eyelids and coldly shattered the expectation he had hidden in his eyes. Of course it's a lover. Don't bother me. Sleep. My dad wanted me to see Vic then I'll just surprise him. Merle Sassoon was depressed for half an hour, and seeing that I was breathing smoothly, and making sure I was asleep, she ran lightly to the balcony to answer the phone. Almost at the moment he got out of bed, I opened my eyes. Merle Sassoon was afraid of waking me up, so her voice was very low. The cooperation with Wilbur Trolpo can make another point. Well, don't clarify that you're not bankrupt? He was proud, you know, of fart. Our business is to grasp the heart of the gold master, and we can get on the throne in the future. I leaned against the door with great interest, and the words undercover and stealing secrets blended into the irritable evening breeze and drilled into my ears. Bankruptcy is pretended. Merle Sassoon's sacrifice is quite significant. Merle Sassoon finished talking to his assistant, and when she turned around, she saw me standing in the doorway, and her expression instantly became flustered. He didn't know how much I was hearing, so he could only pretend to be calm. Marcia Strachey. Why is she awake? Isn't she sleeping well? I whispered his name. He looked nervous. I suddenly hooked my lips, stood on tiptoe, and kissed the corner of his lips, lowering my eyes to remove the chill from the bottom of my eyes. Yes, I can't sleep without you. In order to steal company secrets, I can even be a canary to play with. Then I can't accompany him to have a good time and play. I asked Merle Sassoon about it, and he had hundreds of kneeling ways in his mind. My dad was interested in paving the way for Bard Strachey. The birthday banquet was held grandly, and many high-class people from wealthy families, who usually had dealings, were invited. Even the recently rising mall upstart Wilbur Trolpo was invited to the party. I raised my eyes to the man, who was being held by the stars, and he seemed to notice my gaze, and raised his glass in my direction. Merle Sassoon coughed and moved to my right to block my view. He was wearing a well-cut suit today, with straight lines outlining a slender and straight figure. The people around him whispered, "Isn't Merle Sassoon bankrupt?" The two rivals for so many years would actually invite him. I heard that Marcia Strachey has adopted this prince. TSK. I didn't expect the prince to go bankrupt and be willing to fall. That's not whoever gives the money. With whom, Merle Sassoon looked as usual, as if she hadn't heard these words. I kicked him in the shin, full of malice. My feet are sore. He lowered his eyes and obediently knelt at my feet, touching his cool fingers. Tut! If you don't say that Merle Sassoon does big things, you can bear it. I lifted his chin. That's good. That's when it happened. A woman in a smoky purple bandeau gown walked up angrily. Marcia Strachey, you're going too far. Merle Sassoon is not dealing with you, but you're also too insulting. How can you force him to kneel? She called Nicole Ann, Vic's sister. After Merle Sassoon went bankrupt, she also tried to find out his whereabouts. I pinched his chin and smiled meaningfully. Merle Sassoon, did I force you? I used some force on my hand. He frowned slightly, and the tails of his eyes were red. Nicole Ann hurriedly said, Merle Sassoon, don't be afraid. With Maya's house, she doesn't dare to do anything to you. Who would? Merle Sassoon held my slender ankles, let the tip of the heel step on his knee and say, I did it voluntarily. He stroked my frayed leather in distress. This shoe is really of poor quality. Hundreds of thousands of high heels. You say the quality is poor. There was an uproar. I let go of him, looked at Nicole Ann instead, and smiled. My dog, whatever I do, he's willing. You, shameless. Nicole Ann ran away with red eyes. Merle Sassoon had offended a lot of people before, and when he saw that he was so obedient in my hands, someone was about to move. Marcia Strachey, I will buy him for 2 million. I want to see how the high-ranking prince will serve people, ha ha ha. His features huddled together obscenely, and he glanced mockingly at Merle Sassoon. Merle Sassoon, don't worry, I will definitely treat you well. I laughed. What kind of cow and horse are you? Dare to play with my dog? Scolded in front of so many people. His face was ugly. Marcia Strachey, it's just a thing. You can offend me for him. I raised an eyebrow. He picked up the bottle of red wine, and smashed it on his head. What don't you dare to offend? Bang, accompanied by a scream. Shards splattered, blood running down his forehead. In the midst of the chaos of the crowd, Merle Sassoon quietly wrapped her arms around my waist, and frowned slightly. You just said I was your dog. I glanced at him. Why, it's not good. He was silent for 2 seconds, leaned his head in my ear, and let out a very soft sound. Wong. My heartbeat suddenly missed a beat. He's nervous. I pushed his big face away with a blank face. Pay attention to the occasion next time. When my dad came over with Bard Strachey, he saw a ridiculous scene of a man with a bloody face, sitting on the couch with me, putting his feet in Merle Sassoon's arms and massaging. My dad almost fainted. Bastard. The man was taken to the hospital by security guards. I made a mess of a good birthday party. My dad was very defensive, angrily swayed the servant away. Who told you to bring Merle Sassoon? And you? I don't know how to check. I spread my hands out. Isn't that okay? Whoever doesn't play with a few lovers in the wealthy family, Vic and won't mind. He took a deep breath. I thought I was messing around because I was angry with him, and I was dissatisfied with him forcibly removing my position as president. Sooner or later, the Strachey family will be handed over to your brother, and he will be good to you. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. He patted me on the shoulder. How can a father not love his children? Dad left you a 5% stake. Mrs. Ann is coming soon. You must not come anymore. I looked very consultant. Merle Sassoon people are gone. The lights were on the stage, and my dad announced that Bard Strachey would be the president of the Strachey family group. Everyone looked different, and most of them were not surprised. Just with Bard Strachey's big mouth, it has long spread throughout the business world. I just didn't expect it to be today. Nicole Ann glared at me hatefully. Mrs. Ann stepped up just in time and dropped the bomb of the 2 marriages. The 2 sang and harmonized. I don't know. I thought they were the 2 of us who were going to get engaged. A scattered voice sounded behind me. I turned around and met his smiling peach blossom eyes, and winked at me. It's Vic Ann. The corners of my mouth twitched. You are really filial. Speaking of which, I don't get along with him very well. We were college classmates, and he was having a lot of fun at the time, and he was betting with his brother about how long it would take to catch me behind his back. Out of revenge, when he went to KTV with several beautiful women, I dialed the anti-pornography number. As a result, he gathered in the box to play mahjong, and when his hands were pressed against the corner of the wall, His face was covered with white stripes. I have been laughed at in the circle for more than half a year. Later, he found out that I did it, probably because he was weak, and didn't settle accounts with me. He smiled and leaned closer to me. Marcia Strachey, I know you're dealing with Bard Strachey, and it just so happens that I don't like him, and don't think about cooperating. I asked him, what are you trying to do? Figure you, he paused. The family's property, you 7 and I 3. How? His proposal sounded unreliable. Still, I can take advantage of him. Today's fuss is not just aimed at Bard Strachey, but the entire Strachey family. Thinking of this, I ignored his suspicious pause and reached out to touch his palm. Happy cooperation, he smiled, happy cooperation. Fiancé. Behind, Merle Sassoon's face turned pale, and the light in her dark eyes was sparse and shattered. Mrs. N was very happy with me. Even though Nicole and complained to her about my troubled private life, she still stuffed the ancestral jade bracelet to me, and her face was as gentle as water. I backhanded it back to Vic Ann. Auntie really doesn't care. He was not surprised. Oh, she also raised a boy. You can keep this bracelet. It's not worth much. I forcefully shoved the jade bracelet into his palm. I'll talk about it when I'm really married. Anyway, this marriage can't be done. Okay, Vic Ann smiled. But as a collaborator, I advise you to be careful. He glanced meaningfully at Merle Sassoon not far away. Merle Sassoon from above. How can you be willing to be toyed with? I touched my chin. It really can't be. That's why he's secretly plotting against me. It's not early. After saying goodbye to him, Merle Sassoon followed me silently. On the way back, he was dumb too. Not a word. Until home. He slammed the door shut, leaned over and hugged my waist tightly. The space instantly narrowed, and the tip of his nose was a nice smell of cold pine. Domineering kisses swept in. He bit my lip fiercely, but his voice trembled. Marcia Strachey, why are you engaged to him? Do you like him? What am I in your eyes? I gasped, a contemptuous smile spilling over my throat. Who are you to question me? He was stunned. I raised my hand and grabbed him by the neck, and pressed him against the shoe cabinet in the hallway, looking at him condescendingly. Merle Sassoon, you're just a little finch I raised, a dog that teases when I'm bored. Who I'm engaged to? It's not your turn. He lowered his head suddenly, his pale lips twitching slightly. A crystal teardrop hit the back of my hand. He cried. I deliberately asked him frivolously, like me. He lifted his tearful eyes and nervously waited for my next step. You really like me? I lowered my head and kissed the tears from the corners of his eyes, smiled and said, I have money. I don't mind raising you one more. He is 135. You are 246. Merle Sassoon is willing. Merle Sassoon's pupils shook. You want me to be a junior? I nodded. His face was full of disbelief. Merle Sassoon was raised with a child, and being willing to be a canary by my side can be said to be his pervert. Let him know 3 things and bear the condemnation of his own morality, which is to jump on his thunder pool. Merle Sassoon couldn't accept it. He pursed his thin lips into a straight line, was silent for a long time, and finally opened the door and left. He's gone. The huge apartment fell silent again. Outside the window, the darkness of the night filled the room, as if it was about to swallow people. I lit a cigarette irritably. Overstatement really drove Merle Sassoon away, and his heart couldn't stop being sour. White smoke is exhaled. He wouldn't be unable to think about it, because the blow was too big or the plan failed. Right. I rested my fingertips on his avatar, realized what I was doing, and sneered and tossed my phone aside. Merle Sassoon is not bankrupt again, and he's such an adult. I'm worried about what he's doing. I still smelled of alcohol, so I simply went to take a shower and changed into comfortable pajamas. An hour passed, and I looked at my phone, and all I could see was spammy and provocative messages from Bard Strachey, the retarded one. I'm not worried about Merle Sassoon. It's just that I'm afraid that he will die and waste public resources. I opened the door with a cold face. The hallway lights lit up instantly because of the screeching sound. I watched in amazement at Merle Sassoon, drunk, sitting on the stairs with her knees crossed, with a few empty bottles at her feet. He was drunk. He looked up and saw that it was me, and tears welled up in his eyes. Marcia Strachey, you don't like him. He struggled to get up, but after sitting for about a long time, his legs were numb, his body was shaking. and he was about to fall to the ground. I caught him quickly. Merle Sassoon buried herself in my neck and whimpered quietly. He's not as good looking as I am, not as tall as me. Marcia Strachey, you're not only ill-eyed, you're over the top. A dip came from the skin of the collarbone. My Adam's apple rolls. I really saw him crying. I couldn't get excited. The heart hurts as if it has been pricked by a dense silver needle. He bit down indignantly. Hiss. I gasped in pain and slapped him on the back of the head. Bite lightly. Merle Sassoon suddenly raised her handsome blushing face, her dark pupils reflecting me. He struggled for a long time, as if convincing himself, when the time comes, I'll be caught and raped. Remember to code my face. I don't need to have a figure. I have it. Abs. Me. Others are juniors, and they are willing to be cheap. He muttered, I'll be a junior, and I'll fall in love. Merle Sassoon's tears welled up again. Marcia Strachey, like me. I sighed and ordered him, open your mouth. The drunk Merle Sassoon was obedient, her lips obediently parting a little. I kissed it. The corridor was silent for too long, and it went out again. In the dark environment, the faint sound of warm water sounded, and a roaring heartbeat. I couldn't tell if it was his or mine. I forgot how long it was, until I felt my lips tingle. Merle Sassoon fell asleep on my shoulder. I pulled my phone out of his pants pocket and unlocked it with his fingerprint. Send a message to his assistant, in. The Merle Sassoon assistant is very dedicated, and he will be back at 1 o'clock in the morning. Merle Sassoon in the morning. I've studied 20 Poe texts in the past few days, and this time I can definitely seduce Marcia Strachey. Ha ha ha. I was speechless for a moment. At the top, typing is also displayed. Short words on the keyboard. I'm Marcia Strachey, assistant, Merle Sassoon. Don't make trouble. I endured it. Press the voice. Merle Sassoon is drunk. Come and pick him up, or let him die, and send me the address of my house. Assistant, Marcia Strachey is good. He even hit the exclamation mark, and frantically withdrew the first 2 shots. The assistant is a worker. Half an hour after the drive, the sleeping Merle Sassoon was so weak that she didn't dare to look me in the eye. I don't know what Merle Sassoon thought when she woke up. In short, within 2 days, the internet was full of news that I was engaged to Vic Ann. My aunt bought a water army, and the common area was praising our talented and beautiful women. A match made in heaven. Then it was the Sassoon family that cleared up the rumors of bankruptcy. The heat quickly overwhelmed the marriage of the 2 wealthy families. You must know that during this time, there are many people who fall into the ground. Like me, now that I don't have the power to speak in the Strachey family, everyone is waiting to see my jokes. Merle Sassoon began the liquidation with a thunderous approach, and was so busy that no one was seen. Bart Strachey has really made a difference since he took over the company. In just half a month, a project of 500 million yuan was negotiated. With self-confidence, he began to resign from my people in the company, suppress an entertainment company under my name, and take my property, eaten away. His purpose was obvious. He wanted to corner. This decisive and ruthless style reveals the shadow of my dad. However, I didn't care too much, and sold the shares that were transferred to my name. Every now and then go out on a date with Vic Ann. On the bright side, I gave up on myself and gave up struggling. Unfortunately, Bart Strachey didn't have to wait long. The project that can bring 500 million profits on his lips is yellow. Not only that, the products under the Strachey group were sniped by 2 forces, and in just 3 days, I don't know how much I lost in the accounts. Bart Strachey couldn't hold back, so he had to ask my dad to clean up the mess. I laughed out loud when I looked at the photo of my dad that my dad was so angry that the secretary secretly took me. Can you not be angry? He checked and found that the company's liquidity had been emptied. You can't even plug the hole. Other wealthy families smelled the smell and mercilessly snatched the connections and resources of the Strachey family. What's worse is that Bart Strachey's illegal work behind his back has been exposed. My dad put all the money into it to remedy it, but to no avail, and the old friends who had been good friends with him seem to have evaporated from the world at this time. The edifice will fall. The secretary said that my dad had gray hair overnight and was a teenager old. The day the Strachey family declared bankruptcy. Bart Strachey is gone. I brought a bottle of champagne to the company to meet my dad to celebrate. He stayed up for 3 days in a row, and his eyeballs were bloodshot. Seeing me coming, he pressed his eyebrows tiredly. It's over. It's all over. As family can't be trusted, I poured the wine slowly. He sat up straight and fixed his gaze on me. No, I have a way. I took a sip of my wine. Listen up. He said that Wilbur Trollpo of Stracheys Group. Wilbur Trollpo was interested in me, and he wanted to exchange me for Wilbur Trollpo's support. My dad looked frantic and jumped up to me and grabbed my hand. Marcia Strachey, for the sake of the Strachey family, you would be willing, would you? Without waiting for me to say yes, he hurriedly called the security guards to come up and tie me up and take me directly to the Wilbur Trollpo bed. However, the security guard looked at me and roughly pushed my dad to his knees. He was stunned. You guys are crazy. I sighed. Of course Wilbur Trollpo is interested in me, because I'm Wilbur Trollpo. His pupils contracted violently, and it took him a long time to react. And he said hatefully, "You did it, I'm your father. You're crazy." I kicked him down, and drew the dagger I had prepared, the cold tip of the knife slicing lightly across his throat. Then when you killed my mother, did you think about today? When my mother was pregnant with me, he felt that only his first love could give birth to a child for him. During the pregnancy when she needed to be accompanied, she didn't go home at night, and the lace news continued. Later, my mother suffered from postpartum depression, and when he found out, he impatiently said, "It's just hypocrisy." And my mother's spirit became worse and worse, and she became irritable, and she couldn't even recognize me. Until the night of my 5th birthday, she was rarely conscious, dressed up beautifully, and told me bedtime stories. I slept peacefully in her arms, but the next morning, the maid found her in a bathtub covered with blood. Hatred welled up in my heart. I gritted my teeth and said, I never believed that my mother committed suicide, and it was my dad who switched the drugs that the doctor prescribed to my mom, forcing her to have a nervous breakdown and turning her into a madman in order to let his precious son recognize his ancestors and return to his ancestors. His eyes were scarlet. What if it wasn't for Ina Trollpo? Mia wouldn't have died in childbirth. She wouldn't. Death. It's all that slut. I silently raised my dagger and stabbed it down. My dad's eyes were filled with fear and he screamed. There was a smell in the air. The dagger just grazed his ear. I said coldly, I was going to kill you and Bard Strachey with my own hands. But now that I think about it, it's not worth it. Bard Strachey. Bard Strachey. His eyes widened suddenly, and his strength suddenly increased, and even the security guards couldn't control him. He knelt in front of me and wept bitterly. Spare Bard Strachey. It's all my fault. You're going to get revenge on me. I smiled and patted his face. Then you're going to die. He suddenly sat down on the ground with blank eyes. The corners of my lips curled in a mocking arc. My dad is the most selfish man. I can't bear to die. But what I didn't expect was, not long after I left, he climbed onto the roof and jumped off the tall building. When I saw the news, I was drinking at home. My brain was groggy, and I fell asleep on the sofa in a daze. When I woke up again, my wrist moved, and ding-ling rang loudly. I stared silently at the slender chain in my right hand. The surrounding environment has also changed, and it is not my home. Marcia Strachey. Merle Sassoon's eyes darkened, her slender fingers playing music on me. Twist lightly and slowly. It made me panic and muffled. Don't touch. I don't know which word irritated Merle Sassoon. He grabbed my wrist as if he was fierce. You hate me so much. Vicken is engaged to you. But as soon as your family goes bankrupt, he cancels the engagement. He can't be trusted at all. Marcia Strachey, I'm the only one who can help you now, I said, with a complicated look in my eyes, stealing a glance at the ice cubes and red wine on the bedside table. So, his assistant instilled in him the knowledge of Poe literature again. Merle Sassoon ripped off her tie and wrapped it around my wrist in a loop, playfully hooking her lips. Marcia Strachey, eat a piece of ice. 100,000. He pointed his fingertips downward. It's just here to eat. I looked at him dumbfounded. His eyes moistened inexplicably. Merle Sassoon scrambled to wipe away my tears. I was wrong, Marcia Strachey. I shouldn't have scared you. I didn't deliberately deceive you into going bankrupt. At that time, the capital chain was broken, and Stracheys Group found me to cooperate, so I survived the crisis. At that time, I was at the bar just after talking about cooperation, and then I saw the man next to you. I was jealous. And I was deliberately beaten by Bard Strachey to rely on you. I didn't speak. Don't be angry, Marcia Strachey. He kissed me on the lips as if flattering. Good news for you. Okay, Quinn Strachey didn't die, but his hands and feet were broken, and he could only lie in a hospital bed in the future. And it was better to live than to die. Oh, I was not interested. If you're still angry, he pretended to be calm in his tone. I'll do whatever you want. You can punish me however you want. Really, I got excited. Merle Sassoon didn't know what to say. I tied a bow for him. Merle Sassoon's face flushed with shame and she begged for mercy. Marcia Strachey, it's uncomfortable. With a smile on my face, I untied my tie and tied it to his hand again. The lights went out in the room, and consciousness was blurred in the dim light. He gasped. It's a bit of a strenuous. He put his arms around my waist and shifted positions, his voice low and hoarse. Marcia Strachey just need to lie down. Sporadic words drowned out in the raging storm. Outside the window, the orange sunset receded like a tide, and the sky was quickly swallowed up by darkness. The silent starry sky trembled slightly. Afterwards, Merle Sassoon held me tightly in his arms. Marcia Strachey, don't you want to talk to Merle Sassoon if you're sad? Can you tell your little Finch? The air was quiet for a few seconds. I sighed. No, I don't want to talk to you. I just couldn't control it, and hated my mom for abandoning me. After she died, my dad's resentment shifted back to me. Connived at Bard Strachey to deliberately push me into the water, and even the servants could bully me at will. When I was a child, I hid in the abandoned attic and cried, always wondering why she didn't take me with her when she left. She knew how much my dad hated me. Does Mom really love me? Before leaving, Auntie wants you to remember her best. She loves you. Merle Sassoon kissed the tears from my eyelashes with pity. Auntie just can't hold it anymore. My heart is sour. Back to hug him. Muttered, yes, I think so too. Wake up early in the morning. Merle Sassoon secretly carried me behind my back and deleted my wished messages. I found out, and he was cheeky and coquettish to kiss. Vicken sent you a harassing message. I helped the baby delete it. The baby won't be angry. Me? No. He was still thinking about Vic as engagement to me. The dissolution of the marriage contract by the Ann family was originally in my plan, and Vicken only wanted to get Bard Strachey to abdicate, but I used him to add fuel to the fire, and hasten the bankruptcy of the Strachey family. I have no use value, and my wife naturally wants to cancel the marriage. Merle Sassoon kissed me contentedly, kissed, and the fire hooked up. He looked at me blankly. Marcia Strachey, I want to. I calmed my breath and calmly pushed him away. No, there's something to do today. He drooped his head aggrievedly. I cupped his face. Come with me to find your mother-in-law's ashes. Merle Sassoon snorted proudly. Is it a mother-in-law? Quinn Strachey didn't say where my mother's ashes were hidden until she died, but he secretly sent Bard Strachey away, and he would have told him to force me to keep him safe. I was prepared. Bard Strachey disappeared for 3 days, and I finally found him in a remote city in the south. The men said that it was where he had lived before coming to Stracheys' house. Bard Strachey was vigilant and paid for 5 or 6 outlaws to protect him. I had arranged for dozens of thugs. He was a wanted criminal, and he hid all the way to Tibet, and his whereabouts were well concealed. Even if, no one will find out if they die here. But Merle Sassoon whispered frantically in my ear, what if our children don't want to inherit the family business, and want to take the public exam? All right, he has a point. So I chose the legal form and called the police. I just didn't expect Vicken to follow. Bard Strachey was handcuffed by the police who broke into the house, and when he saw me, he yelled, Marcia Strachey, you vicious woman, forcing your biological father to death. Are you really not afraid of retribution? Merle Sassoon scolded him coldly. My Marcia Strachey is kind and kind. I tugged at his sleeve, a little speechless for a moment. How did he get up as a schoolboy? Bard Strachey was taken away by police. I secretly found my mother's ashes in his house, and the ashes of Quinn Strachey's first love. Put together, my stomach churned. It's disgusting. I found a feng shui treasure for my mother to bury. Vicken approached me, glanced at Merle Sassoon beside me, and said bitterly, Marcia Strachey, it wasn't my intention to cancel the engagement. It was my mom's idea. Merle Sassoon whispered, Mommy, baby, I won't do this. Vicken, he apologized to me. I smiled indifferently. It's meant to be cooperation, and I've got what I wanted. And so are you. He was silent for a long time, and then suddenly asked me, Marcia Strachey, is it really impossible for us? Yes, I led Merle Sassoon, who was on the verge of a rampage, to leave. Then Merle Sassoon found out that I was Wilbur Trollpo, almost softened. He grinded the soft flesh of my earlobes and gritted his teeth. So Marcia Strachey knows everything, and deliberately plays with me. Angry, he quietly brought the other end of the collar to my hand, and took my finger in his mouth. A puppy will never be angry with its owner. The night was still long. The end.